Dr. Mills, I have two questions for you, and then I'm going to just hold on to them for a second. One, are human beings designed to eat meat? And two, what is wrong with fish and seafood if you can get it from pristine waters? And what about fish oil? And hold on that. And then Dr. Goldhamer, if you could answer, if someone is not going to go to your fasting clinic, what would be the ideal water fasting regimen for someone to do from their home? And the second question is coffee a healthy or unhealthy choice? And hold on to that. And then, Dr. Fuhrman, where do you stand on fats such as flax oil, hemp oil, olives, avocados, and also what specifically is wrong with eggs, assuming you buy free-range organic eggs, and what about egg whites? And then Dr. Popper, what do you recommend for people with Crohn's, colitis, irritable bowel, celiac, gluten sensitivity, or other gastrointestinal issues? And also, what do you think about smoothies? So if you could all answer your two questions.
Is that the only questions you had?
You want us to go in turn?
Whatever you like.
Okay, well, first, I think one of the questions directed to me was about coffee. You know, coffee contains a highly addictive nervous system stimulant called caffeine, which I don't think is a health-promoting food. It has, you know, a couple thousand other chemicals in it. I don't think it's a healthy food to eat. I don't recommend patients use it. We certainly don't serve it at True North Health. As far as fasting, tomorrow morning I'm going to be speaking exclusively on this idea of fasting. But what I can say is there's something people can do safely at home, which is fasting every day for about 12 to 16 hours, depending on how you narrow your feeding window. If you don't eat after dinner, say 6 or 7 o'clock, and you don't eat again until morning, it might be 9 or 10 or whatever it is, there's a period of fasting every night. That period is going to range from 12 to 16 hours. Even that period of amount of fasting, as I'll demonstrate tomorrow morning, has been associated with positive health outcomes, including increased glycemic control, reduced incidence of recurrence in breast cancer, et cetera. So not eating, particularly 3 hours before you go to sleep, for example, and doing that on a consistent pattern is associated with better weight control, better health outcomes, regardless of which diet that you tend to be consuming.
Okay, all right, let me take the what's wrong. First of all, I do not use the term seafood. They're sea animals. They're nobody's food, okay? Secondly, well, what's wrong with them? So I'm gonna, y'all know I'm interactive. So I'm gonna ask some questions. What's the natural diet for a horse? What's the natural diet for a cow? What's the natural diet for a giraffe? Leaves. What is the only point in all of those animals' lives when they eat animal protein? When they're babies, exactly. When they are in a rapid growth phase. For herbivorous animals, animal protein is a growth stimulant and signal. It turns on growth genes called TOR genes that cause the body to try and enlarge, tell cells to start multiplying. It also stimulates the liver to start cranking out something called insulin-like growth factor, which again stimulates cells to try and grow. As an adult, can your cells grow? No. They can form tumors, but they can't grow. And so the problem with animal protein is that it stimulates our cells to try and grow when they are supposed to be in a quiescent phase. And so what ends up happening is they begin to form tumors, and some of those tumors are cancerous. Animal protein causes cancer because it turns on growth genes in adults, which are in essence oncogenes, or cancer-causing genes. That is true for beef, chicken, pork, and fish flesh. So all animal protein does this. And the reason it does this is because they are very high in the essential amino acids. And this is where nutrition got everything completely backwards. When nutritionists start looking at plant proteins versus animal proteins, one of the things that they noticed was that the animal proteins had higher levels of essential amino acids. And so they said, you know what? Those animal proteins are higher quality than the plant proteins because they had more essential amino acids. But that was completely wrong. When our body sees those higher levels of the essential amino acids, it interprets that as a signal to try and grow. The plant proteins have more than enough essential amino acids to keep you healthy, but not so much that they turn on these growth genes, which end up causing cancer. So in fact, the animal protein sources are of much lower quality for adults because they will cause disease. Now, the question took away one of my favorite reasons for not eating sea animals, because they posited something that really can't happen. They say, well, let's assume it was grown in pristine waters. First of all, there are no pristine waters anymore, okay? And what I usually say to people is, if you had to eat nothing but lungs, would you eat the lungs from an animal raised in a coal mine? And people say, of course not, because it would be full of coal dust and dirt and soot. Well, that's the problem with eating animals that have been raised in the ocean. The ocean is filthy. It is full of sewage and chemical waste and everything we dump in it, and sea animals have to filter it in order to breathe, and that's why their bodies are so loaded with toxins. And when you eat that, you are eating massive amounts of toxic waste because of bioaccumulation. So we should stay away from it because it's animal protein and it will turn on cancer genes, and we need to stay away from it because it's loaded with toxins.
I think I was third and you were last. All right, I think I remember some of the questions, and I just have to say that, you know, I feel that I may have become a little more strict as I've gotten older with what I advocate to people and even to my patients, because I really feel that it's an important niche, because there's a lot of people marginally making things less strict and telling people they can do all these little compromises. But I want to offer people, and some of us do, we choose to give people, who's offering to those people that want to maximally extend their lifespan, maximally reverse their diseases, maximally not get cancer, maximally not, in other words, we want to have, as our people who are looking to us for advice, to answer to them and to give them the program that's going to give them the best opportunity for their life to be as healthy as possible. We're not watering it down to broaden the amount of people that embrace it. Other people can do that. It's not wrong to do that, but some of us have to take the approach of offering people what is really the best thing for people who want to do what's best for themselves. And don't get a watered-down information that's trying to attract more people into it. We all could have done that. You know, I remember when I first wrote Eat to Live, the publisher, Little Brown, was telling me this could be such a such a big, great book if you just water it down a little bit more. And I'm saying, I'm not looking to make it a best-selling book. If it's a best-selling book, it's probably not going to be a good book because of what the people want isn't what's best anyway. I want to put out something, and over the years, of course, it became a best-selling book for a different reason. But of course, the point I'm making is that's a niche we choose to occupy, and we think it's an important niche to occupy. And thank you. What's that? Okay, the question about oils versus nuts versus avocado and things like that, that's also an excellent question, because I think right now that, even though it was just said that animal protein can drive cancer and be dangerous, right? Even that was just said. I want to say right now that olive oil and salt can drive cancer and be dangerous also, and people should know that. Because oil tells your body to stop losing weight. And fat on the body increases risk of cancer, and fat on the body is hormonally unfavorable. And it's not 70% of our population that's overweight. It's 89% of our population that's overweight. They just call it 70% because it's 70 because they use that BMI. 25 is the demarcation line the government uses between overweight and normal weight. If you use a more favorable BMI where long the people are at 23, then we have 89% of people overweight. And of the 11% that's not overweight in America, out of that 11%, about 8 of that 11%, 8% out of 11%, or almost 80% of those people are ill because they are alcoholics, they smoke cigarettes, or they have some medical problem that keeps them thin. It's only 2% of Americans that eat healthy and exercise regularly have a normal weight, by the way. 2.5% actually that exercise regularly and eat healthy enough to have a normal weight. So let me say this about the oil. I think every nutritional scientist in the world could not disagree with the fact that walnuts are healthier than walnut oil, and that sesame seeds are healthier than sesame oil, and that avocados are healthier than avocado oil. When you take the fiber out of the fatty food, you automatically make the fat become instantaneously absorbed at a high efficiency. So now the calories enter the bloodstream within 3 to 5 minutes instead of within 2 to 3 hours. So we're changing the biological nature of the food. And when food enters the bloodstream, it revs up fat storage, and you can't have lipolysis and breakdown of fat as calories are entering the bloodstream that rapidly. And eating oil stops fat loss for not just for days even. And what I'm saying right now is, and Alan said earlier, salt and oil are appetite stimulants. They both stimulate dopamine stimulation in the brain. But when you're absorbing nuts and seeds at 1 or 2 calories a minute, right, it's completely different because you're not going to be storing it as fat. The body primarily looks to burn it for energy preferentially rather than store it as fat. But when you have 200 to 300 calories of oil into the bloodstream, there's no way the body can preferentially burn it as energy. It chooses to get the fat out of the bloodstream as rapidly as possible, and it starts revving up fat storage hormones. And so what I'm saying right now is that oil and fat and salt prevents people from successfully getting their body fat low enough. And if they don't get their body fat low enough, they're not going to get the anti-cancer effects that we want for them hormonally. We want people not to, not to have a big, to have, what is it called? A six-pack. We want people to have a six-pack and not rolls of fat hanging over their waist. And people eat healthy and they don't lose weight. And look at all the people eating, vegan or plant-based who are still overweight. The vast majority of them. And the salt and oil is interfering with their ability to get that extra weight off. And what I'm saying right now is that olive oil is a factor leading to a higher risk of breast cancer, because olive oil is keeping people from getting their extra fat off their body. And the extra fat on the body is keeping their insulin resistance high, their aromatase enzyme activated, and their angiogenesis promotion going too excessively. So it is important. So what I'm saying is a completely different biological effect from eating a pecan or a pistachio nut and pecans or pecan oil or pistachio oil. You can't control the calories when you're doing the oils compared to the moderate use of nuts.
Okay. All right. Well, you quoted an interesting statistic that about 2.5% of the people are eating a healthy diet, an actual healthy diet. And I think that's my point. We have got to change that number. So whatever we have to do to change that number, let's try to work together to make that happen. So the 2 things I was asked to talk about is gastrointestinal difficulties and how to resolve them. And the resolution is different for different ones. I mean, for celiac patients, they have to restrict all gluten, and then you have to repair the gastrointestinal tract and adopt a healthy diet. And for inflammatory bowel disease, we have a 5-step program that involves a very bland diet of cooked foods, and we phase in more normal plant-based eating over time. So it's difficult to, I guess the thing that I could say about all of these conditions is that they're brought about principally by eating a terrible diet, a little bit of genetic predisposition in the case of inflammatory bowel disease, for example, and celiac, but principally brought about by eating the standard American diet, and conversion to a low-fat plant-based diet is the best hope of making them better. One gastrointestinal condition that's a bit of an exception to the rule is irritable bowel. And the reason I say that is that for people who truly have irritable bowel, and it's very overdiagnosed, but for people who really have it, there's a psychological component that must be dealt with. And if you don't deal with it, the person won't get better. Now, I mentioned that it's overdiagnosed, and this is an important factor, because if you just have constipation or diarrhea and you change your diet and it gets better, you never had irritable bowel. But if you have constipation or diarrhea, or they alternate, and you change your diet, and so I guess coming back a little bit, I've got ahead of myself. So what I'm saying is that when people go to doctors and they say I have gastrointestinal difficulties, my bowel's all screwed up, I'm constipated one day, and the next day anything that they can't find another thing to call it, it gets called irritable bowel. So you get these statistics. There are like 45 million people in the United States who have irritable bowel. They don't, all right? You have 45 million people who are constipated or have diarrhea, or it alternates, and about 10 million of them have irritable bowel. The rest of them will get better when they change their diet. And those who actually have irritable bowel will require some type of psychological intervention in order to get better. I teach a 7-lecture course on it, and it's much more complicated than what I'm telling you, but I think it's the exception to the rule in terms of resolving gastrointestinal disorders. The other question had to do with smoothies. I have smoothies. We teach people how to make smoothies. I don't see any reason for people not to have smoothies. There are some who say that when the food is all ground up, then you don't get the benefit of the nutrients, and that's really not true, or that you won't get the cardiovascular benefits of the food. That's really not true. If you want to pay attention to the one thing that would make a huge difference in achieving the cardiovascular benefits of green food that's made into a smoothie, it has more to do with the bacteria in your mouth than anything else. So one thing that people can do to improve how they process food is to stay away from mouthwash, except in situations where it's really, really necessary, because it wipes out all the bacteria in your mouth. So for people who are concerned about things like nitric oxide production of eating green food, like if I don't chew it, I'm not going to get the benefit of nitric oxide. Oxide really doesn't have anything to do with chewing. It has to do with the condition of the microbiome in the mouth. So it won't matter if you chew it or not. What matters is that bacteria.